Welcome to Swenglanese, the only podcast talking the language of business here in the Middle East. Your hosts, Barry Lee Cummings and Oscar Andermo, give you their own insights, as well as interviewing business leaders in the region to help you on your entrepreneurial journey. Barry, Oscar, let's talk Swenglanese.
Just before we get started, a quick word from one of our sponsors. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Cobabble. Cobabble is a technology platform that aims to help you digitize and digitalize your business. Simple to use, massively powerful, and guaranteed to bring your paper-based archaic processes into the digital age. Cobabble leverages the smart device technology already in your employees' hands to help streamline processes, share information, as well as educate and train your workforce. Whether you have paper-based checklists, forms, or audits that need digitizing, are looking for a better way to communicate with your teams, need to train them on the go, or are looking to replace your existing system with one that is far more cost-effective, Cobabble is the tool for you. Check out cobabble.com for more information, to request a demo, or sign up for your free trial. Cobabble, your digitization partner. Okay, and let's get on with it. Hello, and a very warm welcome to this episode of Swenglanese. In the virtual studio this week, I have the pleasure of Martin joining me. Hi, Martin. How are you?
I'm very good, Barry. How are you?
Doing very well. Thanks very much. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. I'm really interested in speaking with you today based on what you're doing right now. But I also, for all of our listeners, we like to start by rolling the timeline back a little bit and just telling people a little bit about yourself, Martin, introducing yourself and where did it all start from a professional perspective, some of your experiences along the way, and then bring us up to date today in 2022 and what you're doing now.
Thank you. I'm getting quite old, so I won't extend too much on details. But as you all have guessed already from my accent, I'm French. 41 years old, born and raised in France. Studied at HEC, which is a business school in France. Then I spent 7 years working for the Boston Consulting Group. Had a small adventure for 1 year in a biotechnology company, but it was a big failure. Came back to BCG and I was quite adventurous. So moved from BCG in Paris to BCG in Morocco to start our operations there. And I had this idea of starting a business. And then after 1 year in Morocco, I identified that idea of starting Infomineo. And I started developing the company out of Morocco. And then as we expanded in new countries, I wanted to find a place where I could base my holding and develop new entities and so on. And the UAE seemed very good. So 7 years ago, I moved to Dubai, where I've been since then, except for a period of 6 months during COVID, where I was blocked abroad in the longest 1 week vacation I've ever took. And since then I've been in Dubai, and that's on the professional side. So I have Infomineo running for the last 10 years. Last year, I started a second business called Data Exchange. We can expand on that later on if you wish. And on the personal front, I'm married and the happy father of 3 kids, 10, 7, and 4 years old, and my wife is also an entrepreneur. So there's a lot of entrepreneurship going on in the family. Quite a lot of companies being run out of Dubai.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And thank you for that very, very quick roundup. So I'm going to go right back to the first thing that caught my attention there, which of course is the initial failure. From an entrepreneurial perspective, it's always something to learn from, I think, in terms of the actionable. So can you tell us a little bit about that in terms of how it happened, the kind of company, the idea, and why did it end up being a failure in your mind?
Yeah, actually, I was not the entrepreneur. I joined a startup at that time. So basically, I was at BCG and I felt it was, we were all the same and so on. I wanted to make more of a difference, and I had that adventure of a company developing cancer treatment, and it was startup, and it was really exciting to participate in something like that. And what I was too naive to understand was that the culture of the company, the personality of the people you work with is critical. In that case, the CEO was a madman. But literally, I mean, the guy now is on trial for fraud on clinical trials, fraud on tax, and whatever. So after 10 months in the company, I realized it would never work. And I was the right hand to the CEO, and I realized how important it was to work with people you get along with. I mean, you spend more time with your coworkers than you spend with your family and so on. And I felt I was, and also from an ethical perspective, I didn't want to be involved in a business that was so unethical. So I knocked back the door at BCG, and they were kind enough to take me back. So that was a short adventure, but I really realized the importance of the people beyond just the fact that it's an exciting project, and that was really critical.
Yeah. No, very good point there. I think that for a lot of our listeners is that the people you work with or the people you choose to go into business with, it's such a critical decision, and it's one that has to be made early on a lot of the time, and sometimes it's a difficult one, and the decision can come back to bite you. But it's also, I think, the ability to say, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this and get out. I think that's something that we have to understand too. But you obviously did a lot of time and work with Boston Consulting, and a lot of people look and say, well, you know, that's a secure job and a great company to work for. Why would you then think, you know what, I think I'm going to go and do something on my own? What was it within you that made that something that you wanted to happen?
It's a very good question. So there's two elements. One is I have zero aversion to risk. I'm not, multiple ways. We discussed earlier that if we played rugby, both of us, and it's a risky thing. Why would you ever play rugby and get hit by others that are twice your weight and so on? And I would take adventures and so on. So the element of risk was for me not a total problem, quite the contrary. And the story follows. My dream is not to be a businessman. My dream is to potentially, and we'll see one day, to go into politics. And I want to go into politics not making it a job, but I want to go into politics as like a passion, something I want to do, meaning that I don't need to make money off politics, because that's the root of all evil. So basically, to do that, you needed to secure enough cash, enough money, so that you did not need to work or to do politics for a living. So I was like, okay, if I want to do that, what is the best way that I can fairly quickly make enough money? And entrepreneurship seems to be a good way to do this, and it corresponds to my character as well. So it was like, okay, to be an entrepreneur, what can I do? And I said, yeah, let me be exposed to as many different problems as possible, to really see the world and learn as early as possible. And consulting is amazing for that, because every 3-4 months we change subjects, change industry, change country, and so on. So I got plenty of exposure through consulting. And before that, to go into consulting, you need to do the best studies you could. And I was, at the time I had that thinking, I was in my small town in Aix-en-Provence in southern France, and I was studying law because I was like, yeah, I don't know. And then from that day on, they said, yeah, okay, now let's try and do that. So I went to HEC, which is a business school, and then I went to BCG, and then whatever. It's been driving me for quite a while. So that was the story.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then, so how long did it take from the idea of I'm going to do this? I don't mind the risks. I'm going to do something. How long was it for you from that transition of saying, there's my idea, and clicking that button, as it were, to right, I'm out of here and this is what I'm doing? What was that time scale? Was it a short one, or was it something that you kind of thought about over an extended period of time, making sure that you had, coming back to your point for what you want to do, enough in the bank to keep you going? Because this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs do. Say, well, I think I've got enough, and it's never enough. Or was it just one of those things, I'm just doing it, here we go?
A few things. One, I always wanted to start a business. It's been that project for a while. My wife as well is an entrepreneur, so we had that mindset when we were students together. We were looking at projects when it was, a very early career. We're looking at things together and so on. So it was always on the back of my mind. One of the things we made attention to was not to spend too much, because when you're in a job where you make a lot of money, the risk is you start spending a lot and burn a lot of cash. It's not because you want to make savings or because you want to keep your money. It's just because you don't want to get in the habit that you need to spend a lot every month. And therefore, it makes it impossible to start a business. So we're always quite cautious and reasonable on that front. On the other fronts, when I moved to Morocco with BCG, had that secure job. So my wife started looking at entrepreneurial projects. After a year, she didn't come with something that was super motivating for her. So she took a job, though it was the good timing for me. And I think it's not, starting a business is not, today I'm an entrepreneur, yesterday I had a job. So the way it started was quite funny. So I started having that idea of starting Infomineo. I'll get to what it is. And I wanted to understand, if it could work. So the first thing I did was I started calling guys just to see if what I was thinking of building could be relevant to us. And there was very positive response. And it was, they told me, if you start it, it's very likely we become your clients. So that was one element of it. So making promises, and the guys are liking what you promised. And by the way, I was still an employee at BCG. I was doing quite okay and so on. And I started speaking to people at BCG whether they wanted to potentially become clients. And it was interesting to see that they were very open to the idea. And obviously I spoke to other people. On the other fronts, you need to see if you could deliver on the promise you were making. I'll get to that, but Infomineo is a research company. We do a lot of research. We do other things now, but I'm not a researcher. So I had to find people. So one thing I did, I was still employed at BCG, was I messaged the career services of the best business school in Morocco, and I said, give me the list of your alumni for the last 3 years. And I emailed probably 200 people, said, I'm starting a business, I want to interview you. And I actually interviewed people. Now I think there's prescription of 10 years, but I was actually in the BCG office having tons of people coming by, and I was making interviews with these guys just to assess whether I could deliver. And because there was this matching of, yes, I can make promises that appeal to people, on the other hand, I have confidence that I can make it work. Mm-hmm. Then I was like, yeah, let's do it. So it was not like one day to the other. It was like building, and before I realized it, I had a business running, and it was time for me to move on.
Right. Okay. So did you actually set it up and were still employed, as it were, after doing all of that research and so forth? Were you still in both camps, as it were? There wasn't a clear cutoff until it was already up and running and working?
I would say the share of mind and the time I started spending maybe 10, 20% of my time on this project, mostly out of working hours. The legal entity, I probably set it up like 10 days after I stopped my job at BCG. So it didn't have a conflict in that regard, but it was very quick because I was very clear about what I wanted to do. That's the way it happened.
No, I'm not trying to get you into trouble from an ethical perspective of that, because a lot of people do a side hustle, right? They have an idea for a business, and they start doing it in conjunction with what they're doing from their employment, until they get to that point where they think, you know what, I can make this work. This is working actually. And then I can make that decision. But also the point that I kind of tried to make there is that a lot of people, they think that they've got an idea, and they and ah, and they procrastinate. But actually, it's a process. It's a process of, as you've just outlined, research first of all. Is there a market for what I want to do, and then making decisions based on that? Because I think there's a lot of people that create amazing products for nobody. They come up with this idea, and they're like, oh, this is great. I love it. I would use this. And unfortunately, they're the only person that would. Even when they go out to market and they put it, it's like, well, I've already got one of these things. And they're like, oh, I didn't know about that. And so it's really this idea of, well, and I'm trying to get this idea of balance, is that I want to encourage as many people as possible to go for it. But please.
Yeah, two comments here. One is, I learned about lean entrepreneurship after I'd started the business. And when I looked at the way I did it, it was that lean entrepreneurship is you get something that is an MVP, a minimum viable product. You essentially can see something, etc., and you test it to market as soon as possible. For me, I tested, it was nothing. The first thing I did, I created a slide. I didn't have a company, a name, no nothing. The slide was a blank template from PowerPoint about just the idea, and I was pitching that idea to people, and I didn't have anything, but it was a mini MVP. And as I elaborated the product or the service, I was testing it with clients, and they had power as to what it became. And so if they tell you, do that, I will buy it, then you do what it's much better than to work for 2 years in your garage doing something before testing it to the market. So I agree with you fully. The second point is around, can you do it as a side hustle? I think the likelihood of success in a project like that is also to put skin in the game. At some point, you need to take a leap of faith and say, I believe in it enough. I've seen a lot of people say, yeah, I have 1-2 hours, but then there's the day job that gets you 99% of your revenue, that tells you you need to travel and you can't work on your project for 3 months. And then you do that, and then so many projects. At some point, you need to have a trigger that makes you say, okay, this is going to be all my time. And I think it's important. And maybe it's a good test of whether you really want to do it or not. What level of risk are you willing to take?
Yeah, no, very good point. I think that is the case, especially for those that are perhaps a little bit more risk averse to you or I, in terms of going at it, where they look, I'm really not keen on doing this. But I think it is definitely an indicator of, you know what, again, mitigated risk, understanding what it is that you're going, but then saying, right, I'm at that point, I'm 100% in, let's do it. And then you put everything that you've got into it. And that's the common misconception for a lot of guys setting up, and girls setting up businesses, that they're like, oh, I want to become my own boss and work less and be on the beach and do, you know, whatever. It's a false expectation to begin with. And yes, you may get to that, but you could be anywhere between 5, 8, 10, 15 years of building to get to that point. But the big advantage I say to that is that you are in charge. You get to decide, you know what, today I don't want to do it. I am going to go and just read a book. And but you know that whilst you're reading that book at 9 o'clock tonight, you're going to be like, right, all the stuff that I didn't do today, now I have to do it.
Yeah, surprisingly, I mean, people would think that the level of effort you need to put in a project is linked to the size of the business. Oh, it's not non-existent for now. It's just an idea in my mind. So yeah, I can take it easy. The thing is, I think the effort is linked to the momentum, the change in momentum that you want to create. So we're starting with zero momentum. You need to put a lot of effort to get to something very, very small. And then you have some momentum and you still need to put more energy to accelerate the momentum. I've never worked as hard in this business as before I had my first client, because I needed to get so many things ready, the processes, the tools, because when you start having clients, then you don't have that time to invest. Maybe one recommendation I would like to make to people that are starting businesses is always anticipate on the next step. So, okay, you're going to hire your first employee. Do you need a job description? Do you need an idea on the career they're going to go through? You need a briefing document about what is going to be their job. Yeah, no, you don't really need it. But if you don't do it now, when you have 5 employees that you're coaching day in, day out, you won't have the time to do that. So, or do you need a CRM, or do you need an ERP to be set up? And my thinking is always do it a little early before you actually need it, because once you do, you won't have the time to do it. And just anticipate on the next step. And it's a good test of the level of ambition, by the way. If you want to scale a business to hundreds of people, you need to have an applicant tracking system that allows you to manage hundreds and hundreds of CVs coming in. If you're not willing to invest in those type of things, on the structure and the processes and so on, then it's going to be very difficult to scale, because you're going to be late on everything and just firefighting instead of having the structure that allows you to scale.
Yeah, it's very true. I think that's where a lot of businesses end up, is that firefighting scenario where they're like, oh, you know what, we're growing, it's good. But then it's like, oh, but now we're kind of growing out of control because there isn't any structure or process or policy. You know, not to get too much hung up on that, but there needs to be those things in place, because like you say, once you get your first client, your business plan almost goes out the window, and that client helps you say, like you said, if you make it yellow instead of green, then we're good. If you make it do this instead of that, then we're signing up for the next 12 years. And you think, okay, well then we can do that. And if that's what you want, let me have a chat to a couple of other people. Oh, they want it too. They like it when it's green and it goes like that. So fine. We have to adapt to that with our businesses. But I think a lot of people that I talk to end up with that issue with their ego getting stuck in the way, where they well, it's my business and I've created this product or service because it does this. So I'm sure there's those consumers and customers out there that will want it. And I think that, you know, I know that Apple and Steve Jobs kind of had that approach to, we'll make it this way and the people will like it, and it worked. But those are those very, very rare unicorns where that happens. For most of us, it's a case of, well, what is it that our audience needs from us? Because we might think it is X, but if they all want Y, then we need to get in the market of Y, because that's what they're going to transact with us over. So it's, I think it's a very, very valid point. At which point, I think, can you tell us a little bit more about this current venture, both the one Infomineo and your new venture as well, but perhaps the one that's been running for a little bit longer? What is it, and how did it evolve, and how are you helping those businesses, not just in the UAE, but globally?
Yeah, thank you. So the first business is called Infomineo, and we're in the industry of brainshoring. So you don't look on the internet. So it's a word that I invented. So you're not supposed to know. But basically, the concept is the following. When you do outsourcing, so the basic premise is a company cannot be good at everything. You are good at a few things. You were mentioning Apple a minute ago. Apple is amazing at product design. They're amazing at marketing and sales. They are crap at manufacturing. They have no idea how to build a computer. That's not their core business. So they outsourced it to Foxconn in China. And they're very happy with that. So for me, every company wants to do some things and not others. When it comes to services, you started outsourcing things that are really basic. Your call center, for example, or you started using BPO, your payroll is outsourced, or maybe your appointment is outsourced, whatever. And then starting emerging an industry which they called KPO, for knowledge process outsourcing, where you're starting getting into services that have more value add, like data research or research for patents or legal or writing contracts and so on. And I like this idea that, you have 8 billion brains in the world. They're not all in London, in Dubai, in New York. They are everywhere. Mm-hmm. As long as you train people, they can work from where they are, and you can make cost arbitrage, but more than cost arbitrage, and really find talent that you would not be able to tap into otherwise. And the problem with KPO, it's been developed mostly from India, and I was using them as BCG. And my partner Hamza, who was at McKinsey at the time, was also using this type of services. And we were frustrated with the quality of service because it was very much on, I'm going to execute. Send me an email anyways with 6-7 hours of time difference. We can't talk on the phone. Send me an email. It's going to be super clear. I'm going to do whatever you tell me. I'm going to send it back to you. But when you want to do things that are complex, that doesn't work. You need to explain. If you had told me, Martin, we're going to do a podcast, send me an email, and I'm going to learn everything. I mean, that dialogue would not have been very rich, right? It's because we're talking together that it's much better. So you need to do those services from nearshore locations where you can talk to the people. You need to select people based on the critical thinking they have. And brainshoring is essentially the outsourcing of tasks that require critical thinking, close communication to the client. Today, we do 3 things. We do data research. So I want to understand the strategy of PepsiCo in Africa. I want to size the market of mini computers in Zimbabwe. I want to whatever. So essentially a service where you get people to provide you data to make better decisions. And, data is everywhere. You need more data to make better decisions. Very few people are good with that. A second service that we have is around graphic design. So you can have the best insights, the best thinking. If you can't represent it in a way that people understand it, that it connects to, it doesn't make sense. So I love Excel, but it's not the best way to communicate. And when I was a consultant, I'd spent nights and nights on PowerPoint moving boxes to results that were really subpar. I don't have any sense of aesthetics or anything. I was wasting a lot of time. And you would have design artists that would take your slides. You say, okay, this is an impression I want to give to people. This is going to be the context with 200 people in a room. I want it to be super dynamic, etc. They can really advise on how you make things work. We have another service which is a little more opportunistic at this stage, which is in translation. In the region, translating from Arabic to English and the other way around is a nightmare. So we have a team of 15 people doing that. And we're about to launch a service in a few months about data analytics, where companies create large sets of data, but they can't make sense of it. It's too big. They don't have the capabilities to do that. And then the idea for us to say we're going to do data research, then data analysis, then data visualization. So it's a whole cycle around how data can help you, improve your business and be more efficient. So that's Infomineo. That's the services. In terms of people, we are reaching 200 people now. We hired 38 in the last 6 weeks, so it's really accelerating, and we will end the year at north of 250 probably. 2 main offices in Morocco, where we started, where we have 80 people, I think. In Egypt, we're a little north of 90. We just opened an office in Mexico to serve the Americas. So now we're opening a new market with our presence in Mexico, and we also have an office in Dubai, where it's mostly business development, and a holding company in Spain. So that's about us.
Truly global organization already from that side of things. Just to come back to one point there, and that you've got these offices, you're servicing different markets. What was the attraction specifically of the UAE, Dubai, to sort of base yourself from the business development side of things and have a sort of a head
quarters, if you like to call it that, or base yourself there out of all of those? Because you're servicing parts of the Levant, you're servicing South America now. I saw the posts on LinkedIn about the Mexico office and that growth. What was it about the UAE that he sort of said, you know what, I think this would be a good position for us to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we started initially only in Morocco, and then we wanted to open in Egypt. Morocco is a great hub for servicing Europe and a large part of Africa. And to service the Middle East, Egypt was by far the best location. Everybody goes to Lebanon and Jordan, but Egypt is much better. So when you start having a multinational company, even though we were probably 20 people at the time we opened that office, you need to have a legal entity to consolidate all that. And the legal entity, you want it to be in a jurisdiction where the law is strong enough, where you have double taxation agreements, where you can transfer money easily from a country to the other, and so on. And when you take the 54 countries in Africa and you look at the Middle East, because we were starting from that region, you don't have many locations that are very good. And the UAE stood out very easily from the crowd here. And as it happens, we did a study a few editions, looking at where decision-making centers were for companies when it came to Middle East and Africa. And like 60% of the whole of the decision makers when it comes to Middle East and Africa are in Dubai. So for me, it was much less travel to be here, to be close to my clients. It was a great location, and that made the deal. And besides, from a personal perspective, my wife is half British, wanted our children to speak English. It's a great location to speak English. It is safe. Quality of life is not bad. So there's plenty of things that brought us here, and there's not a second I regret this choice.
Yeah, no, fantastic. It's one of those places that has a huge attraction. I think it has this amazing energy around entrepreneurialism as well, in terms of the ability to do something and make a difference and establish yourself on the ground. It's always interesting, when your other half is also in that same industry from an entrepreneurial perspective, in terms of just the ideas bouncing around. And I think that what I found actually in Dubai is that it's also a lot easier to connect with people, that people tend to be more open to having those conversations. Networking is a pastime, in Dubai, that you're constantly doing those things, and that it makes it, I don't want to say easier, but it just makes it seem as if the opportunity to talk to somebody that would actually really benefit your business is there, and that they're more willing to open that door as well, as opposed to, let's say, back in Europe, and when I started my career with Microsoft and knocking on doors from that side of things, it's difficult to get through to decision makers and get past the gatekeepers and so forth. Whereas here, it seems like it's a lot more geared towards, well, I want to talk to you because maybe there is something that your company can do for my company, or vice versa. And I think I've really enjoyed that kind of energy in Dubai and the UAE for sure. But when it comes to the future of these companies, so let's switch gears again, because I did want to get to this idea of the air quotes, serial entrepreneur. You've built this business, which is growing and expanding and getting bigger already. And then you suddenly say, you know what? I think I'm going to start a new one. So can you tell us a little bit about that other business that you've recently launched and why it's come about? Is there a link with the first one? Or is this just something that, I'm risk averse. I'm going for it. I've just come up with a good idea.
Great question. Infomineo is doing well, and the idea is now we have a team that is very strong, and it can scale. I'm still involved 90% of my time in Infomineo, but we're growing north of 40% this year, and now it's the momentum that I was mentioning earlier is there, and we have a very, very strong team to lead that business on its growth path. The other business is called Data Exchange, and I've thought about it the day I started Infomineo. Essentially, Infomineo is a company that provides a service to find data to do, and in what we sell is time. It's a great business because it's a business that generates cash. We never get any funding. We never get a loan from the bank. We've been profitable first year and so on. It's a great business. But when you want to scale, you want to double the size of the business, you double the number of employees. And doubling the number of employees is more and more challenging as you go, because this year we're going to hire more than 100 people. And the year after, probably more than 150. It's difficult to find the right talent, to train all these people. By the way, it's an amazing thing to create jobs. That has been a blast to identify people and to see these people having a job, a career, enjoying what they do and learning. Okay, let me put that aside. There's another business model that works really well. It's to have an asset. And I'm convinced of the value of data and information as an asset. There is this saying, which is a little of bullshit, but it's, data is the new oil. It's not really oil, but data has value. Data helps you optimize a business. And there's data that is open out there, that is on the web, that is whatever. There's a lot of data that is produced by companies as a byproduct of the activity. You're Carrefour, you produce tons of data about your customers. You are in B2B, you produce tons of data and you don't do anything with it. And it's an asset that you have. If I want to be a little theoretical, today companies have, I would say, 2.5 assets they have. One is capital. So you have capital, you pay your shareholders, you have work, you pay your employees. Some are quite okay at intellectual property, patents, and brands, and so on. And for me, that other asset that nobody does anything with is the data. The data generates zero value, and it's never going to be a priority for companies to extract value from that. Again, take that example of Carrefour. You do billions and billions with selling products. You have data, you can do a few millions on your data. It will never be a business priority. But if somebody came to you and said, you have that asset, don't do anything with it. I'm going to sell it for you on your behalf. Right. And I'm going to generate a few million. It's not revenue that I'm generating, it's profits, because you have zero investment to be done. Then the business case is very different. On the other end, you have plenty of companies that are having issues to optimize their business, and they need that data. Let me take a simple example in the same line of thinking. You are Coke, okay? You have a sales force that's costing you a fortune, and you need to incentivize these people. Today, the way you do it, you give bonuses based on growth. You've grown the business. So in 2020, nobody did a good job because the market crashed. In 2021, everyone did a good job. I mean, you know that it's not right. A good salesman is the one that wins market share, that wins over competition. So how do you know that you beat Pepsi with Carrefour? Only Carrefour knows. You don't. So if Carrefour were to provide the data about your market share, shop by shop, Pepsi versus Coke, so that you can use that to incentivize your salespeople, you can extract a lot of value, keep the best people, give the right incentives. And you need somebody to do that. Why is it not happening today? Because all these companies that have data, all these companies that need data, if everyone needs to speak to everyone, every company needs to speak to every company. It creates a web of connection that is massive. Suppose you have a company in the middle of that deals with Carrefour and with Etisalat and with all these guys, and also with the guys. Instead of having N times N relationship, you have N plus N relationship. It's a super simple model to create that exchange place. That's why we call the business data exchange. It's an exchange platform for data. So initially you can just be an exchange, a trader of data. But then what is interesting is when you start getting multiple sources of information, you put these sources together, and they're way more rich when you put them together. Let's again take that example. The data of Carrefour is useful to Pepsi, or to Pepsi or Coke, but it's more interesting to also have the data of Panda and of all the other retail chains. That creates much more value, and only data exchange can make the aggregation and sell it to others. And then you could also do work on the data instead of having massive sets of data, sell dashboards and others. So that's what we are doing. We are an exchange platform for data to help optimize businesses, and the asset is the data. It's not the work that we do on the data.
Right. That's amazing. I think that's, to your point at the beginning, I do some work with an initiative I run called Beat the Cyberbully, and I talk to students about staying safer in the online world and some of the things that mums and dads need to be aware of. And one of the things that I say in all of my presentations, that one of the most valuable resources on the planet right now is data. It's not Bitcoin and it's not Ethereum and it's not gold and silver. It's actually data. And so many people are giving their personal data away, but I think that's a brilliant business idea, brilliant model that you've come up with, because to interrogate the data, as you said, there is so much available information that is just not used, and it's there. And so I think that No, I'm pretty sure that that's going to be a super successful business, because the more and more that these organizations get into the digital world, they start to realize how valuable the data is, and also perhaps just become aware of how much data is actually available to them, aside from what's happening on their e-commerce platform and how many sales have gone on and all of this kind of stuff. But all of the other data that actually could help, as you said, incentivize sales forces, optimize processes, all of these kind of things that are going to become, I would say, essential. They should be essential already, but they're going to become essential as we move more and more into this digital world, where we are transacting in the digital space more as people, but also as businesses. And every single one of those transactions, there's data attached to the metadata that can be used. And we had this idea a little while ago about cleaning up your online reputation as one of our business ideas. And then Facebook got hacked by Cambridge Analytica. And so that they shut down all their libraries, and we lost that opportunity. But the idea still remains in terms of the ability to actually use your data and tailor that data. And as a business to then say, because I think a lot of people still don't understand how, why is Google a multi-billion-dollar organization? The Facebooks, the Snapchats, the Instagrams, and all this. It's data. It's all the data that they have on us because of where we go and what we do on their platforms and what we show them that we like. Taking that and actually doing something with it, I think is essential. It's valuable. But I think the real thing that you've identified there is that a lot of companies don't know how to do it. And so if somebody comes to them and says, hey, here's how we can do it for you, there's, I think, a lot of light bulbs going on, and maybe has that been the case in terms of the launch and the pitching to these kind of organizations? Have they seen the value pretty quickly, or are you still on that slow burn of re-education?
So there is a lot of education going on. Let me just step back on what you're just sharing. It's very interesting. Facebook, Google, etc., their business is based on a single promise that they can measure the return investment on advertising. You advertise on very targeted people, and you can measure whether to change their behavior. And you're right, it's because they master the data. Facebook is not a social network. Facebook is a data company, and then being able to do that very well. And many other companies have not because it's not their priority, because they see data not as a core business, but as a side product. It's like you dig a mine and then you have a pile of sand somewhere and you just put it there. You don't know what to do with it. So yes, there's a lot of education going on, but all our clients, because now we're starting having clients, are saying the exact same thing. I have that data. I know that there is value. I have no idea how to monetize it. And I've been trying. I set up a team of 5. They've been working for a year. They didn't come up with anything. And that's based on the fundamental reasons I explained. It's never going to core business. Second, the value of the data. If you invest in it, it's going to be revenue, and you look at the cost you put against it, it's never going to be more core than your core business. So if you outsource it, it's much better. And also this data has much less value. It's just your data. If you aggregate this data with other sources of data, the data of other companies, there's much more value. So it's very obvious to me that it doesn't make sense that companies take care of the monetization of their data themselves. It's not going to work from a structural perspective. It's not even the question of, do you have the skills, the willingness to do it? From a structure, it cannot work. So I really think a business like Data Exchange can make that business exist. And for me, that's a 0 to 1 business. Infomineo, for me, is an incremental business. We do services better than others, and that's why we're growing much faster than competition, because we figured this brainshoring logic, this critical thinking element. With Data Exchange is a 0 to 1, according to the Peter Thiel book. It's inventing a new business model. It is making things happen or making things possible that were not possible before. That's why I'm really very optimistic for the business, and it's picking up nicely. It takes time to educate, on one end, the provider of the data, the clients of the data, but once you do it, then you get an acceleration phenomenon. So we have 3 ways of doing that data monetization. I won't go into details, but there's an idea that you could syndicate data. So people in the same industry will share with you all their own data. You will aggregate, sanitize, and redistribute, so people have a much better view on their own market and so on. There's another one, which is a linear model, where you essentially get the data from A, you sell it to B, and there's another set of approach where you create a data set based on a need. You just do a customer survey, you web scrape, whatever, you create a data asset that you're going to sell. What is interesting at this stage is we have our first 3 contracts on each of these businesses, and it took almost a year to get to these first contracts. But what I'm very confident about is that it's going to be exponential. You get the first contract, takes you a year. The second would take you 3 months. The third would take you 2 months, and then you can accelerate. And what is interesting is you can start on a niche. Okay, I'm going to cover the soda market for the UAE using the data of Carrefour. But then you go category by category, and you can expand that exponentially. And then you go to other geographies. And what is interesting is really you can accelerate the growth in an exponential manner in a business like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the momentum that you mentioned earlier just comes much, much quicker, and you can leverage it much, much faster from that sort of thing. So, which is always a positive thing when you're building a business. If you can get that momentum moving quickly, I think you can make a huge difference. And like I said, I think that the idea of that, and it will be successful based on what's happening now in the market, the realization of the value of data. I think it's something from a digital marketing perspective we've been talking about for the last decade, just in terms of how much data is available to your business through your website and through your digital real estate, and how businesses still in 2022 are like, oh, I didn't realize that, or they don't have any analytics being collected around that. And you're thinking, how much are you missing as a business just from that tiny little bit? And then you take it to the scale that you're doing it, and you can just see the massive, massive opportunity. So I think that will be
the only thing I want to address here is, yeah.
Go ahead.
The only thing I want to address is like expectations management so data is gold. No, it's not gold. For now, it's lead, and it will take time to make it into gold. It could eventually become gold. So if people that have data say, I want to make $100 million of the data next year, this is not going to happen. It's a new area. It will take time. I don't know, electric cars, Tesla started with a Roadster. They were selling 100 cars a year, not even. Yeah. And it took time for the market to mature so that it could become a mass adoption. I think for the data, it's the same. So if companies are patient, are willing to explore, to learn on that new business model, to trust a supplier or partner like Data Exchange, then they can extract massive value, but it's not tomorrow. It might be the day after tomorrow, the day even after. And that's something we have a hard time educating the people we talk to. They say, it has massive value. I'm sure of it. For now, it brings 0 to me. And if you don't promise it's going to bring 100 million, I'm not interested. And this is not how it works. It's incremental, and it's not like day and night immediately.
Yeah, no, understood. And a very good point to make, because I think that that's also a misperception from a lot of organizations, from anything from a data or analytics or digital perspective, is that it's click your fingers, done. It will change, and it will be, oh yeah, we've decided to implement this, so tomorrow everything will be fine from a business perspective. It's not that case. It is something that's going to take time, and it needs that investment of time to make that happen. Now, moving from the businesses that you're involved with, that you've got 2 businesses on the go. You're a husband, you're a father of 3. How do you manage the time?
Optimize. Probably from consulting, I got the habit of optimizing everything. So typically when I chose the physical office we have in Dubai, I chose an office that was 8 minutes away from home on an electric scooter. Right. So literally from closing the door to being in front of my computer, it is 10 minutes. And, I don't need to park a car because it's an electric scooter and so on. On the way, I'm listening to a podcast because I need to educate myself. The school of my children is 50 meters from home. And so it's the avoidance of time wastage that is my key. I'm trying to be really optimizing things so I can actually decide on how I spend my time. I'm quite active in business, and probably people working with me would tell you that I work a lot, but I don't waste time, but I spend hours every day with my kids. So that's really about the avoidance of downtime, and that's what I'm trying to do. And it works okay. And maybe the second point is to delegate more and more, and to realize as an entrepreneur, you feel that the world is going to crash if you're not here. And somehow, when you're not here, it's the planet still turns. You have people in your team that you leave them space, they take that space, they don't need you. So one illustration of that is I was doing just myself roughly 60% of the sales of the company, of the business development last year. My partner Hamza was doing almost 40%, 40%. And in Q4 last year, we decided to go to zero, both of us. Zero. Suddenly, and you don't need to do these calls to clients. You don't need to proactively reach out and so on. You save so much time. And what it happens is the business development team we had created is thriving. They have much more space to work and so on. So disappearing and leaving space to others is a great way that you can save time and force yourself into delegating.
Yeah, no, that is a brilliant point, because I think it's very difficult for a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners or solopreneurs to get out of their own way, because like you said, the world's going to stop turning. Actually, it turns just fine. And given those people that you spent so much time and effort to recruit in the first place, giving them the ability to do the job that you brought them on to do, they can thrive. But it does take a certain amount of, I think, self-awareness to be able to extricate yourself from that and say, you know what, it's that ego again. It's like, well, if I'm not here, then the whole thing's going to collapse. But actually, that's not the case. And if you are truly building a business, that's the whole ethos behind it. Is like, how do I build this so that I can take myself out of this and voila, it's still going and growing, and I don't have to be in it all day, every day. It's something that I'm not very good at. I'm struggling with myself. So it's great to hear that that's something that you proactively do. I love the optimization side of things as well, in terms of saying, you know what, 10 minutes door to door, 15 meters to the school. All of these things that people say, well, that's a small thing. Yeah, but every one of these small things adds up to more time back to you that you can then proactively decide, you know what, I'm doing this because I didn't spend half an hour driving. I did spend half an hour trying to find flipping parking space, and I'm actually just doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So I think that those are really, really cool points. Just as something from a personal perspective, because I know a lot of the people that listen in, they're about to start their journey. They're on their journey. Something that a lot of our guests, what I like to ask a lot of our guests, is just about resources. So from Martin's perspective, is there something or a couple of things that you would recommend to people out there that are thinking about the entrepreneurial journey, they're starting the entrepreneurial journey, anything really that you would say, you know what, if you do nothing else, do this or use this or speak to this person? Or is there a huge list? Either way, you go ahead.
Yeah, it could take 2 hours in this, so let me try and summarize. I think one thing is take care of yourself. Entrepreneurship is a marathon. It's a long thing. It's not so if you burn yourself, you're not doing good for your business, for yourself, etc. So there's small routines. I think we're all good at routine. We are animals after all, and we doing the same thing every day, like waking up, exercising a little. A stupid thing I do, I swim 10 minutes a day. 10, I'm not setting myself targets that are impossible. 10 minutes a day. Why? Because it gets me started, and I'm not stealing that time from my business. I'm not stealing from my family. It just makes me a better husband, a better father, and a better entrepreneur to take care of myself. And I think it's really, really important to do. And it could be sports. It could be just reasonable alcohol intake. It could be these type of things. Second is don't forget about learning. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you're like, okay, I'm supposed to know everything. People come to me for answers, but the truth is you're not better because you have the status of an entrepreneur. So how do you learn? It's really important. So typically keeping on reading things that are interesting. And what I've discovered in the last 2 years is podcast listening. Again, to that optimization thing. I only listen to podcasts when I don't do anything else. So when I drop my son to the nursery on my scooter in the morning, the way back I'm alone. So I'm putting the headphones and I'm listening for 10 minutes. And same for a lot of things. When I'm helping out in the house and I'm, passing the Hoover, it's 10 minutes of my time. Just hoovering is not super exciting. I'm listening to podcasts. And I discovered that I could learn 3 hours per week on average of time that was just hidden that I didn't know existed. So I think keeping time for learning is really essential. So that's 2 among 125 advice I've shared.
No, I appreciate that, and I think those are really, really good points. The podcast thing, I'm a big fan of, not just because we do these, but I do the same. 2 things. In the morning, I wake up at 5:30. I go to the gym. It's my time to do my exercise. And while I'm in the gym, I'm listening to podcasts to learn. And then I come back and I'm ready to take the kids to school and the day, and then get to work. And I think that it's, you're so right. Routine is so important. As much as people say, I don't want it. It helps us. We are designed that way. And I think that it's a super, super thing to end on there in terms of this ability to take care of yourself. Because I think it's interesting. A lot more of my guests are talking about that now. It used to be always about the mentor and the books and this, that, and the other. And now I've just seen this transition over the last, 12 months, and more people aware that taking care of yourself is so important, because as you rightly said, Martin, if you're not good, then you're no good to others. And you've got people, your family, you've got employees, you've got a business that are looking to you to help. And if you're not taking care of yourself, it's very difficult. And so I think those are great points. And it just remains for me to say thank you, Martin. I really appreciate you taking the time, because you're obviously extremely busy with everything that's going on. Really appreciate you sharing your insights, sharing your experience, and just a big thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, Barry. It was a pleasure.
Thanks again. And to everybody listening, thank you for tuning in. As always, if there's anybody that you would like us to speak with, drop us a line, wishlist@swenglanese.rocks, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Swenglanese with your hosts, Barry Lee Cummings and Oscar Andermo. We'll catch you next time.